All right, good evening, everyone. The results are pouring in as the entire nation is watching Virginia tonight. Thank you for joining us for our digital election special. I'm Janet Roach.
And I'm Mike Gooding. We're joined tonight by two political analysts from here in Hampton Roads, Quentin Kidd from Christopher Newport University and Dr. Soji Okamalafi from Norfolk State University. Let's get to it. Brian Farrell first, who's going to give us the latest results.
Things up. What you'll see here are the Virginia results statewide to certain cities and counties and see how things are going. Right now you can see a lot of red across Virginia. It seems is going that way also for Republicans at this point. News, all are favoring Terry McAuliffe at this point. When we talk about that, we of course mean Virginia governor, Republican, has been about 11% throughout the night. So of course, compared to Terry McAuliffe's 40%, Blanding, who is another candidate who's running, that spread is about up 11% over. Tighter when we talk about the attorney. We are at 54. I'll tell you what, too, and I don't know if any election night trivia for you. Evan Stewart actually dug through some numbers, too. In the Virginia governor's race since 1980. The city of Suffolk has picked, and in that city goes on to become the governor of Virginia. Team News Now.
All right, yeah, when he's not doing the weather, hey, he's an election political analyst. So given those numbers that we just saw from Brian Farrell, the Republicans should be feeling pretty good right now in Northern Virginia. So we want to toss it to our reporter, Allison Basil. She is in Northern Virginia, and that's where the Republican ticket is. Hang out tonight, Allison.
Yes, Janet, as the governor is maybe going to switch to red or stay blue. Obviously, that's a question on everyone's mind, and like I said, it's any guess. But we did start a lot of energy here. The room got spirits are high here. Republican candidate Glenn Youngkin's watch party. We're going to do our best to show you the room right now. It's a little tight here for the press, but we started around 7. The crowd has grown ever since. Like I said, lots of fun energy here, especially as the votes are rolling in more. We're inside the ballroom. Lieutenant Governor candidate Winsome is actually planning to come here as well. We checked in with Youngkin, the secretary, asking how they're feeling tonight, and she said they're feeling good. Supporters here are glued to TVs. We hear a few cheers every now and then. We also caught up with Republican U.S. Representative for Virginia's 1st Congressional District, Rob Witt. He says believes Youngkin run a spectacular campaign and says he comes all like the neighbor store that you can talk to and connect with. His communication skills also caught the eyes of some independent voters here. Here's what both had to say.
I think it'll bring fresh ideas of direction to Virginia. I think, too, there's a great possibility to have a Republican legislature to work with, which I think provides a lot of opportunities to do the things that I think people are longing to be done for Virginia. I think it sends message, too, to the rest of the nation. I think Virginia becomes a bellwether for the rest of the nation.
Youngkin has demonstrated a formula of outreach that has galvanized the entire state. Independent voters are going to be in double digits this time. Our Hispanic community is going to be nearing the 5th percentile.
Tonight is still somewhat young. We're still waiting for a lot of votes to come in. So we're going to stay right here. We're going to keep our eyes glued to that stage and waiting for Young to make an appearance. But for now, live in Chantilly, Allison Basil, 13 News Now.
All right, Allison, thank you so much. A little quiet, more quiet than I would think, but they're just waiting for the results. Still early.
You see what she did there? She said it's still young at the young party.
Oh, is it? Well, let's go to back up to Northern Virginia and join Evan Watson. He is with the Democratic ticket, Terry McAuliffe.
Tyson's Corner, where the Virginia Democrat ticket is hosting its election night event tonight. This is where Terry McAuliffe, Ayala, and Mark Herring will be as the results come in. They're going to watch this here in the next hour or so. The trio's most today campaign in Northern Virginia for their final votes, a strong Democratic area. We're seeing higher voter turnout in 2017 in some key areas such as Loudoun County, Fairfax County, Prince William County, and yes, Virginia Beach too. I just talked with Senator Warner, who's here tonight, says he's happy to see strong turnout so far. He was with McAuliffe, Ayala, and Herring last He says they're optimistic but exhausted, and Warner asked all Virginians to be patient as votes keep rolling in.
This back and forth early, I hope bodes well. I was glad that we had a much early turnout, and I would remind Virginians that vote early is one of those I think all Virginians benefit from, and that could be up for grabs if it's not successful. I'm anxious to see some of the numbers out of Hampton Roads. Got to do well there, and I think those numbers are yet to come in.
The McAuliffe team says they feel good about early vote rules, both in Northern Virginia and turnout. Newport News, as the Democrats keep the top state positions of Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General. A few hundred people are here now watching the result come in, both on TV screens and on their phones. I talked to them. They said they're confident and hopeful of what's to come. I'm going to be here the rest of the night capturing the candidates' reactions as we see those vote tallies continue to roll on. Reporting Tyson's Corner, Evan Watson, 13 News Now.
All right, Evan Watson up in Northern Virginia, Tyson's Corner. And everyone's saying that it's still early yet. You know, the numbers are coming in fairly consistently, and now it is looking good for Youngkin. So I'm curious to hear from the two of you. First of all, just your thoughts on how it's look right now, Quentin.
So I think dynamic the way the vote is rolling in is playing out slightly different than we're used to in Virginia. We're used to a cycle where the rural western vote comes in early, and then the metro areas, Hampton Roads, Richmond, the suburban metro areas start to turn their vote in, and then the Virginia counties turn their votes in. So we often start the night red, and then if it's going to be a blue night, it shifts blue later. If it's going to be a red night, it shifts less red but stays red. The dynamic of the early vote, 1.2 million votes cast early, I think is changing that, and I think it's emphasizing the red here early on. Obviously I could be wrong, but I don't think Youngkin is going to win a 50-44 election night. He may win, but there's a lot of early vote out that hasn't been released yet. And so I think we're going to see this move. It may, again, Youngkin is the lead, and there's nothing that says he can't win, but it's probably going to be a 9-point win, given all that vote. And I think that early vote was a strong Democratic vote. And so, you were hearing Mark essentially allude to that just a minute ago.
But you did see Youngkin encourage his voters time to do the early voting. Usually see that very heavily on the Democratic side. Right. You saw more than what you usually see on the Republican side. Right. So we'll see what happens. Your take on how things look right now, Dr.
Please call me Soji.
Soji.
Yeah. Given what happened in American politics for the past 5 years, I'm no longer in the business of predicting.
Smart move.
And then I'm sure Corey would agree with that too. But having said that, it's going to be a very long night. And if you're in the Republican camp right now, you should be happy. Now, whether that happiness is going to last, like Quinn said, we're going to see. But here's something. What I think it's sure is that it's going to be a very tight race. There's no doubt about that. That gap is going to close. There's no doubt. Now, will there be enough for Youngkin to write this to victory? It's too early to tell. My uneducated guess right now is that no matter what happens, the Democrats, they should be feeling a little bit nervous right now. But let's wait and see.
Okay. All right.
Fairfax County has been very slow in coming in tonight. We've done this election night thing many times, and the tide turns when Fairfax comes in. But right now, McAuliffe is down by over 200,000 votes. Right. Could Fairfax come in and save it for him at this point?
Fairfax alone couldn't. Fairfax is about 1 out of every 6 votes cast in Virginia. Fairfax has turned in, reported 2/3 of their election day returns right now. They've reported very few of their early votes right now. There were lots of, early votes, but not 200,000 early votes. I don't think it's going to be Fairfax alone if Democrats survive this. It's going to have to be early votes that lean Democratic. I know that there was a late push to get the core cities to vote. Senator Warner mentioned Newport News earlier, so there was that effort. At the end of the day, though, look, the Youngkin campaign and Republicans ran a master class in how to come back from the desert in Virginia. It's been since 2009, the last time they won statewide race. So, look, you and I talked many times about this. When Glenn Youngkin won that Republican convention in a ranked choice ballot, where a few thousand Republicans, relatively speaking, showed up to vote, you would have been hard pressed to go in any community in Virginia and ask 10 people if they knew who Glenn Youngkin is, and to find one person out of every 15 communities that knew who he was. He went from You don't do that and not run a master class in elections.
And speaking of master classes, you could say that McAuliffe has not run a master class this particular campaign cycle. Soji, he made a major mistake some weeks back on education. I don't know, if I were to guess, I'd say that's the one thing that's killing him.
Yes, before I get to that, let me piggyback on what Quentin said. Now, remember, not only does Youngkin, he does not have a record to run on. That means a clean slate. Right. On the other hand, he's running against a guy who has a record. Okay, so if there is enough to, pick and choose, I like this or I don't like this, that may actually weigh against McAuliffe's, candidacy. But to come to your question, this education thing is a tricky thing, okay? Because no matter how you slice and dice it, you don't even want. If I were McAuliffe, I wouldn't have not gone there at all. Okay, it was a macaca moment, like somebody said yesterday. Okay, but would that be a major thing? It's not what McAuliffe did wrong as much as what Youngkin may have been doing right. Okay, and I said right maybe for lack of better choice of word. Somewhere along the line, I think it was a smart move to pick, and I'm talking about Youngkin right now, to pick on that education thing. I was referring yesterday to this same particular point that, you should have left that to academia. Curriculum, Quentin will agree with me. Professors normally do that. But for Youngkin to inject that into this debate, it's a very smart political move.
My friend Jim Morrison is a writer for the Washington Post, and he did some exit polling today in Norfolk. And of Youngkin voters that he spoke to after they came out from casting their ballots, he takes it one step further and asks, well, why did you vote for Youngkin? And 9 out of 10 Youngkin voters he spoke to said they voted that way because of the whole education brouhaha that was caused by McAuliffe, that they voted for Youngkin.
Well, it is interesting because I've been listening to a lot of sound from voters too who talked about that education piece and that being important. Occasionally you would hear them say things about not liking mask mandates and that sort of thing, but critical race theory came up and about what teachers are teaching. Now, first of all, critical race theory is not taught in Virginia in K through 12. It's not, but Youngkin on the stump, I'm going to ban critical race theory. He was able to take that issue and use it to his advantage, and there are a lot of voters out there right now who really believe that, oh, this is what's going on in public schools, and they were bothered by that. I mean, your thoughts on that?
This is one feature of American campaign that we should take note of. It's like an empty barrel, okay? So sometimes the person that makes the loudest noise takes the day. Forget about the substance sometimes. Because if we're talking about substance, then people should know that CRT, critical race theory, should not even be a topic. That's not, like you said, it's not even taught.
Dog whistle?
We don't even teach it that much in college. It's something that came out of law school, and in most cases, these things are taught and applied at graduate levels. So I don't even know why we're talking about critical race theory, but again, Youngkin is so smart. He's reading the minds of the voters. He knows what people want, okay? Forget about whether it's a loud noise or not. It resonates with voters, and at the end of the day, that's what matters.
So you say dog whistle, more like a bullhorn.
More like a
More like a bullhorn. Critical race theory itself is probably, so we're focusing on it wrong probably. Most of these conservative voters or moderate voters who voted for Youngkin and that was their issue, CRT itself embodies a lot of things that they were upset about. Look, people have been upset about the schools since COVID started and schools shut down. And so I think if critical race theory ends up being the thing that galvanized a set of voters that brought Glenn Youngkin to victory, critical race theory will be a body that a vessel that embodies a lot of issues in one. For a set of voters, and the Youngkin campaign was able to sort of wrap that into 3 words. And remember, the last time an election in Virginia was won with 3 words: no car tax. It works.
Jim Gilmore.
It means something to people who are willing to go vote for.
Right.
And the magic of it is it can mean different things to different people, and yet mobilize them all toward the same goal. And I think that's, if Glenn Youngkin wins tonight, and critical race theory, those 3 words, can be given credit for that, in part or in whole, it'll be because those 3 words embodied a lot of different things to a lot of different people, like no car tax did for a lot of different people. And Jim Gilmore was able to use that very effectively to communicate a grievance that worked.
I just thought of another 3 words. When George Allen ran for governor and beat Mary Sue Terry in '93, 3 words: lenient liberal parole. You remember that?
Exactly.
3 words.
Right.
It's like a formula.
And it embodies so much and different things for different people.
Interesting.
May I quickly add something before we leave this subject of education? We are crossing a very dangerous Rubicon here, okay? Because what people are trying to do when you bring up this CRT thing is we're trying to sanitize history, okay?
Yes, and a lot of people feel that way.
Every nation that I know, Janet, every tribe, every ethnic, whatever, there are 3 aspects of history when you're talking about timeline. I mean, not timeline, when you're talking about substance. You have the good, the bad, and the ugly. Do they want us to talk about just the good and the bad? Why should we leave out the ugly? Because the whole point of history is that we should learn from it so that we don't make the same mistakes.
Don't repeat it.
And we have known what happened in the past when people try to sanitize history. There's a name for that: revisionism.
Yeah. We'll talk more about this, but we want to go to the Republican headquarters I believe in Virginia Beach. Reporter Sarah Hammond is there live with the Republican ticket local.
Yeah, we're here at the Westin in Virginia Beach with about 200 Republicans in this ballroom. They've got live music, which you can hear behind me, food, and of course a screen to watch those results come in. We've seen people mingling around with American flag dresses and jewelry. You can feel that people in this room are very excited tonight. I'm going to move so you can kind of see what's going on behind me in this crowd. We're specifically watching to see if Republican candidates Tim Anderson, Tanya Gold, and Karen Greenhall will flip 3 House of Delegate seats that are currently
currently held by Democrats. And we're also here with GOP Attorney General candidate Jason Miyares, who told us he's feeling good tonight, but no matter what happens, he's happy to see democracy at work. And we're still waiting to hear from those delegate candidates. But for now, folks in this room are keeping the energy very high. We'll check back in with y'all a little bit later. For now, live in Virginia Beach, Sarah Hammond, 13 News Now.
All right, Sarah, thank you. Well, now we want to see what the Democrats are up to. They are also in Virginia Beach, and our reporter Angelique Arentak is there live. Angelique.
Hi, guys. The event room here is filling up with supporters, a few dozen of them or so. We've seen some trickle in, some trickle out in the last hour and a half or so. We're still also waiting to see some of the Democratic candidates enter the room. The relatively low energy that I'm feeling right now, I think, is reflective of some of the incoming early results largely favoring the GOP right now. Regardless, here in Virginia Beach, we've been paying close attention to three key House of Delegate races. One of tonight's big questions is, will Delegate Nancy Guy hold on to the 83rd House of Delegates district seat? And in neighboring 85th district, Delegate Alex Askew is the Democratic incumbent, also seeking re-election. And then there's Delegate Kelly Converse Fowler in the 21st district, also fighting to hold on to her seat. Analysts consider the city, especially the western edge, a political test. Right now, the balance of power in the Virginia House of Delegates is on the line, to be quite frank. Right now, the Democrats, House Democrats, hold a 55 to 45 majority, but with all 100 seats up for election, up for grabs, coupled with some of the early results largely favoring the GOP, it's looking like that could very well change the fact that the Democrats right now have that 10-seat margin. But of course, we'll keep you updated as we learn more. I'll be back on again on 13 News Now at 11 in Virginia Beach. Angelique Arentak, 13 News Now.
Thank you, Angelique. Let's turn to our experts a little bit about the House of Delegates. 55 to 45 is the current spread. Things could flip in the next few hours or by tomorrow. What difference is that going to make legislatively? The reason I ask you that is, during the last 2 years, when the Democrats were in control of the House of Delegates, they legalized marijuana, they got rid of the death penalty. Just two examples, the kinds of things progressives would push. What kinds of things might Republicans push when they're in charge?
Well, a Republican capture of the House and a Republican control of the governor's mansion is not going to lead to the same sort of legislation that we've seen in the last 2 years, because the Democrats will still control the state Senate. So there would have to be sort of the compromise, give and take, back and forth, that you know, in terms of passing legislation that was, you know, as dramatic and change oriented as the last 2 years. However, you know, the governor of Virginia is really powerful, and the governor of Virginia can amend legislation, and you know, it takes a legislature, you know, quite a bit to sort of overcome or respond to a gubernatorial veto. And so so there will be legislative movement in the direction of Republican concerns, but it won't be the same as if Republicans controlled everything. Literally the only hope Democrats have here is of keeping some of the legislative victories they've had in the last 2 years, is that they're going to control the Senate for the next 2 years.
Mm-hmm. But the tie-breaking vote in the Senate could well become Winsome Sears.
That's
what it's looking like right now.
Yeah.
Which would be a whole other dynamic.
Right.
And if you look at those three races, I know that people were following in Virginia Beach. You had Nancy Guy and Tim Anderson. And we know that Tim Anderson has been in the news quite a bit.
Not always for good things.
Not always for good things. Strong Trump supporter, he is the one who went after Louise Lucas when that whole mess happened with the Confederate monument in Portsmouth.
Right.
He was the one that helped lead that recall effort against Louise Lucas, which would make for, you know, so I just can imagine what it's going to look like in Richmond when, if he ultimately wins and they all get together. Do you see it being more contentious?
I'm going to defer to
Yeah,
Quentin.
it would. I mean, yes, except they're going to be in different chambers.
They're different chambers, yeah.
They'll be on either side of the Capitol, so that'll help. They probably won't have to cross paths very often. But if you look at the Republicans running, and the Republicans that are in good positions right now to win, it's clear that the Republican caucus is going to be more Trump-like, if you will. Many of them got involved in politics because of Donald Trump. They were engaged because of Donald Trump. They sort of are proud of that, and so they're going to bring that to the legislature with them.
And go ahead.
I was going to say, Janae, one other thing, and that's to add to what Quentin said, that this is going to do, if these results hold, is that it's going to embolden Republicans. Okay, some of those things that you're talking about, it's going to be very hard to turn back the hand of the clock. I don't see how they're going to take 400,000 Virginians off Medicaid. I don't see how they're going to, reverse, the death penalty, So, but there are certain things that they can tamper with, and that's where the problem is going to be. For the last 2 years, it was like a very smooth ride, or fairly smooth ride for the Democrats. I think the party is over now.
I wanted to read one thing that Jason Miyares said. This is a comment that he's made tonight. Since the Republicans are doing well, he is, of course, the Republican nominee for Attorney General. He says, listen, it's clear what people want. They want a check and balance in Richmond. They think things have gone way too far to the left, and this isn't really an election that's left or right. It's about common sense. People are frustrated by what they're seeing, the prices they're paying at the pump, the prices they're paying at the grocery store, and they're frustrated about other things. How much of this election could be just things that aren't necessarily going right in the world right now or in the country when it comes to gas prices, things that may not be the fault of Joe Biden or certainly Terry McAuliffe? Do you think this could be a referendum on? There's just a lot of things right now that aren't lining up.
Right. Certainly there's a part of that. If Republicans have a clean sweep tonight, which is what things are looking like, it's going to be read as a referendum, whether we think so or not. It'll be read as a referendum on Joe Biden, on the Democrats' control of things. That's just a fact of life. I think part of what's going on here is that for the last 5 years, Virginia in particular, but many other parts of the country have sort of had this inflated sense of how democratic Virginia really was. Trump inflated the Democratic advantage in Virginia because so many voters, went out and voted against Donald Trump. Virginia is not a 10-point Democratic state, which is literally what Trump lost by a year ago. And I think the sort of theory of the election for the Republicans was Virginia is not a Democratic 10-point plus 10 state. Virginia is a much more sort of middle-of-the-road state. And so let's run a campaign that takes to task Democrats for what they've done in the last 2 years. And Democrats ran, their theory of the electorate seemed to be Virginia is a plus 10-point state, and let's run on that. And of course, if the sweep that we're seeing right now becomes reality, the Republican theory of the election and the electorate was right.
See what you did there? It's going to be read, R-E-A-D, as a referendum, R-E-D. Am I right?
Both.
People kept talking.
I was taking a cue from Basil here.
Well, people kept talking about what was going on in Washington and how, they need to do something because Terry McAuliffe needs something to run on. There was a lot of effort to pin the back and forth in Washington on Terry McAuliffe.
Yeah.
Then you look at the other side. And so you say, well, what are the Republican congressional members doing? I didn't see a lot of effort to pin what was going on there or not going on there over Youngkin.
I may be the only one, Jenny, with this opinion, but I go out on a limb anyway. You see, I have not really bought into that theory that because the Democrats in the Congress have not been able to, pass the Build Back Better or the reconciliation bill. No, that's not what is going on right here. On the other hand, if that is the case, then Trump's personality has not gone anywhere. It's still there. Because if Trump can campaign for Youngkin, just what, Monday night, okay? If what is going on in Washington, D.C. right now affects McAuliffe, then the fact that Trump is campaigning for Youngkin should take something away from him. We haven't seen that evidence at all. But here's my take on it. The reason why I think we're seeing what we're seeing right now is that most of these so-called Biden Republicans, they never left. The reason why they voted for Biden was not because they abandoned the policies, it was because they ran away from the personality of Donald Trump. Youngkin
brought them back in.
Does not pose any threat. He's a very likable guy, by the way. Because like I said, he came to Norfolk State, I met him. He's a very personable guy. So if you had been turned off by the obnoxiousness of the last campaign, here's something for you that you can, go to the bank with and cash your money. And that's what we're seeing tonight, especially with those numbers.
And again, Youngkin would have run the perfect campaign. He moderated it just enough. The Trump base, has been all in, but he's not gone so far that direction to turn off the Biden Republicans who never left the Republican Party, but weren't willing to vote for Donald Trump.
Let me ask you this about Trump, because I was surprised with it. We're used to seeing him doing these rallies all over the country with thousands and thousands of people. Here in Virginia, he released a 2-paragraph statement through his Political Action Committee yesterday morning, and then he did an 11-minute telephone call-in last night at 8 p.m. That's the extent of what he did for Glenn Youngkin. Are you guys surprised?
Only because, again, the Youngkin campaign dialed it just right. They weren't willing to let Trump do more.
Well, that would make them the first people ever that could dial Trump any way that they so chose, right? I mean, he usually does what he wants to do.
You're right. You're right about that. I mean, again, if the numbers we're seeing tonight hold, I don't know how you don't say the Youngkin campaign basically gave the nation a masterclass in how to run in the era of Donald Trump. And it's a roadmap for Republicans all over the country on how to do this, how to stay just far enough away from Trump, not to get burned by him, but just close enough to keep all of his base excited by you.
Talking about having your cake and eat it at the same time, that was exactly what Youngkin did. It's like having Trump without the personality, okay? And that's exactly what the suburbians, that's what they want. Okay, the reason again, and I don't want to belabor this point, the reason why they went to Biden in 2020 was because of the personality of Trump, the cult personality. It's no longer there now. They're having their cake. That was a very smart move on the part of Youngkin's camp, by the way.
But he did just enough so that if he is declared the winner, Donald Trump will claim responsibility.
Oh, sure.
You bet. You bet.
As we've said on a number of occasions, Trump, oddly enough, so Youngkin, the dynamics of this are just, you can't script it any better. Youngkin stayed just far enough away not to get burned, but just close enough to benefit from the Trump base. And Trump himself wins either way. Youngkin wins, it's because Trump encouraged his supporters. Youngkin loses by just a small bit, it's because he didn't embrace Trump enough.
And that's exactly what he would come out
Very quickly, Janet, what is going to be interesting to find out is if Youngkin wins and eventually if Trump decides to run, let us see and find out if Youngkin is going to be beholden to Trump. Because Trump is always going to come back and ask for the favor.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see what happens.
All right, we want to go to Brian Farrell again, who has some updated numbers.
Yeah, we're looking at about 82% now reporting across the state of Virginia. And we're going to talk about, obviously, the top three here. We're talking governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. And the thing's interesting when we talk about a potential clean sweep. When you look at those big three, the breakdown is really about the same, whether you go from the governor's race, 54%. It's some variation of that in the lieutenant governor's race, 54.5%, and then one more over there to the attorney general's race, 54.1%, again, putting Republicans ahead. The other thing, of course, we had mentioned you can do with the map that we have here is break it down by city, by county, and kind of see where the breakdown is. Let's go back to that governor's race for just a second. I'm going to zoom in here to the Hampton Roads area. So, of course, Virginia itself is looking very red right now. So is Hampton Roads, with the exception of some of those, I call them the core cities, really Central and Hampton Roads. You're talking Norfolk, Portsmouth, Hampton, and Newport News. So let's start off with Suffolk here. At this point, Suffolk is showing 55% for Glenn Youngkin. We'll go over to Chesapeake, 59%. So now we're pushing towards that 60% mark, which is the same in Virginia Beach at 58.7%. Interesting, when you hop over to Hampton, where Terry McAuliffe is doing better, you're a little bit beyond that at 61.6%. So let's call that 62% in Hampton voting for Terry McAuliffe. And if we go over there to Portsmouth, we're seeing a 59.4%. Actually, I said Hampton. I think I hit Norfolk when I did that. Let me do that one more time so we're getting that right. The finger hit the wrong city. They're a little small there. That's why I blew them up a little bit. Terry McAuliffe at about 62% in Norfolk. Now let's go over to Hampton, and we can see 64.6, or almost 65% now in the city of Hampton. So again, you're seeing that kind of pattern repeated in Hampton Roads and across the state of Virginia. But it's really interesting to me because when you talk about a clean sweep, I mean, you can have a clean sweep that's like a 70-30% in one race. You can have something that's more even in another race. But these really across the boards, at least for those three, the top three, are really in that 54% area with Republicans in the lead.
All right, Brian, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Brian keeping up with the numbers for us. So, I mean, if things hold and Youngkin wins, let's talk a little bit about what he might do. He's talked about the grocery tax, getting rid of the grocery tax, bringing down, I guess, the gas tax. How do you see his administration looking?
So if we put this in the context of recent history, somewhere like a Bob McDonnell administration. I think the focus would be somewhere like the Bob McDonnell administration, minus some of the social issue controversies that were alive during that administration, because I think Youngkin is more business oriented, more nuts and bolts oriented. Mm-hmm. And again, if the Democrats have a voice in policy making, like they'd have in the Senate, it would be hard to sort of make major changes that were controversial across party lines. And he would probably find a chunk of Democrats to support getting rid of a grocery tax. Mm-hmm. He probably would find a chunk of Democrats to support lowering the gas tax. Mm-hmm. And so these would be, in some ways, these campaign promises are sort of easy to fulfill.
Another campaign promise, day one, I'm going to ban critical race theory. Yeah. So how does he do that? Because first he has to define it as what it really is.
Right. That's one of those things in the empty barrel. Mm-hmm. Now, you can't even do it constitutionally speaking. I don't even think it's possible. Quentin may correct me if I'm wrong. How do you, I don't even know, because there's something that we call within the four walls of the university academic freedom, okay? So I don't know how they're gonna craft that bill, but I can tell you right now, it's probably gonna end up with the courts. That's not, I don't know. But one more thing, and I want to say this for the benefit of your viewers. Mm-hmm. You look at the numbers that we're looking at right now, mm-hmm. especially the statewide, that it's a textbook example of voting down the ballot. Mm-hmm. Because the folks who just look at the governor's race is the same thing, the same number, the same percentage when it comes to the lieutenant governor and, of course, the AG. You have there, like I said, a textbook example of people went into the polls, their minds were made up, and they checked that stuff. When it is blue, then it's blue down the line. When it is red, it's red down the line, which makes me feel that these numbers might hold.
Yeah, I'll tell you the easiest way to fulfill the campaign promise related to critical race theory, and that is, if it doesn't exist, it's an easy campaign promise to fulfill with an executive order. And that would essentially be the way to do it, where you avoid, you can't ban something that doesn't exist, but you can executive order it away.
I just wonder if there will be, some of the fights that we're seeing with the school boards and over the school boards as certain lessons about history continue to be taught, and parents thinking, oh, wait a minute, that's critical race theory, and you kind of see this sort of localized fights going on over that.
I would not, I'm sorry, Mike, I would not worry too much about what the governor is going to do when we're talking about critical race theory. I would worry about what the boards of education will do. These battles will be fought, lost, and won at the local levels.
Coach and Quentin, let me ask you this real quick. We're running short on time, but abortion. Could we see a Texas-style abortion law in Virginia if we have a Governor Youngkin?
In my mind, no. His answers, whenever he had been asked that, were evasive enough to make me think that he wouldn't go down that path. And I don't think he could get something like that through the legislature as easily as the Texas legislature. Texas legislature is vastly different from the Virginia legislature is going to be, even if Republicans sweep these House races and have a strong majority in the House. And so I don't foresee that. And Glenn Youngkin on the campaign trail on a number of occasions suggested that it wouldn't go down that route. Additionally, not that I'm a Supreme Court expert, but if you listen to the court yesterday on this case, it didn't sound like the Supreme Court was inclined to let the state of Texas do what it did, not because they might not support or oppose abortion, but if they allow that, they open a door to allow states to essentially work around constitutional issues that states don't like, constitutional protections. And it didn't seem like the Supreme Court was willing to go down that path. So I'm not even sure the Texas-style abortion law is going to be a viable path come the springtime when the Supreme Court releases its rulings.
Okay, well, we are going to wrap up our coverage, our digital election special. We thank you so much. You all are always so good, providing so much insight.
Soji, thank you. Quentin, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
You guys were great.
All right, and make sure you tune in for 13 News Now at 11. And of course, we have some more election information, as always, on 13newsnow.com. I'm Janet Roach.
I'm Mike.
I'm Quentin.
He's Soji.
And have a good evening.
It's 82%, that's gone.